All right, cheerio.
Cheers, mate.
They won't give me a passport.
Well, we outlined some things we're going to cover. So
Okay.
we've done, I think, quite a detailed review of the issues. Right. This is you'll need to squeeze all of this into like, I don't know, 60 seconds or less for
Okay.
your opening a context. I mean, this is advice to the debaters. But for us, what do you want to start with, Kane? 1 MDB, GST, or anything else in the political power balance that we haven't already touched? If you just want to wrap up, because I think we've talked about politics.
We'll
Quite
kind
a
of
bit.
get to it when we talk about other stuff. As people will realize, or listeners, or viewers, is that in Malaysia, politics, business, and life in general are very interconnected, and you can't divide them.
True.
Almost very incestuous.
Almost.
I'll talk about the 1 MDB.
Okay, let's do that.
As I've outlined earlier, there are 14 states. All the states, minus the federal territories, have generally formed corporations or other business entities to cover the interests of the state. I mean, in Malaysia, the federal government and also state governments own corporations and business interests. There has never been any efforts to make the distinction. In fact, it's almost accepted as a way of doing business. So one of the things happened is one of the states, Terengganu, proposed to create a sovereign fund, even greater than what they already had in the state. The Prime Minister, just-in Prime Minister at that point, 2009, Najib Razak was interested in the value proposition and backed it. So the 1 MDB, Malaysia Development bond, was issued. Funny enough, it was a bond that's supposed to support or to aid the country get forward to build itself. But up to today, 5 years later, very little of the funds have actually been used for any development projects. Instead, they have been used for investments in curious items, no less than a large amount of that fund, which was raised by bonds, which are guaranteed by the Malaysian government. Although the 1 MDB does not belong to the Malaysian government, the 1 MDB bonds that have been issued
Are
is
guaranteed.
backed by the Malaysian government.
Yeah.
So it's in essence, it is the Malaysian government's bond, and money was transferred to the Cayman Islands and invested there for many years.
For its transparency.
Yeah, the issues were raised. Newspaper editor was removed for questioning it. Several other people have got into hot soup over it. The government has changed track and now says that the money from the 1 MDB is going to be moved back to Malaysia. These are developments from this year. However, in the last 1 week, division leader within UMNO, which is also
unprecedented.
well, very few precedents for that, has filed a police report against the 1 MDB, which is backed by the Prime Minister, which means it's open defiance against the Prime Minister by an UMNO division chief. There are about 180 UMNO divisions in the country, and each division, 190 division, and division leaders are very, very powerful in deciding the place of the president of the party. And for one division chief, not a member, not just a branch member, to file a case means that there must be support elsewhere within the party and other players. It smells the same kind of energy that was in 1998 when Anwar Ibrahim was removed, where several kinds of reports and were made by UMNO division chiefs against Anwar Ibrahim at that point. So there's a strong similarity between that, and some people say these are the first opening moves of what do you call, going to be a lengthy chess game, which some say might end with may not end very well for Najib Razak, because he's personally backed the 1 MDB.
Right. He himself hasn't said anything about this.
He has gone very quiet about the matter.
Although that's not unusual for him, generally, to go very quiet.
Najib Razak is a cautious man. He does not like to take chances, and he does not like to talk more than he needs to, especially in issues that are highly debatable and may expose him in any way, shape, or form, irrespective whether they're wrongdoings or not. He's a very cautious man.
Fair enough. That's the game we play.
Which moves you to the GST.
Yes, the goods and sales tax.
First of all, the GST, as you would understand it, would be the same as that has been employed elsewhere in the world. Obviously, there are different systems. It has not been instituted yet. It will start April 2015.
April 1st
However,
next year. Yep.
However, it has already been passed, so we are in the process of finalizing details. However, so much of the information has not been shared with the general public, except basic necessities will not be taxed, and more luxury goods will have higher GSTs attached to them. The general premise is a lot of Malaysians do not pay adequate amounts of taxes. In fact, it's told that only about 20% of the population pay taxes. So, in order to deal with the black economy, to deal with the idea that it's harder to collect through the tax department, the GST has been instituted. The biggest concern is not that there's a new means to collect taxes, but there will be a new means to add the amount of money available to the government, and the general population is uncertain whether that money will be used to provide facilities and benefits for the general public.
Yep.
And that's the question mark that everyone has. Is that what's going to be used for these funds?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one, because Malaysia is an exporter of oil. We not necessarily a poor nation. So many people feel the issue really isn't to raise revenue, but better manage revenue. But there's also a fear because the economy is not generally doing that well. A lot of in recent times, improvement in the economy has been government-led investment into the private sector. Private sector hasn't really, driven
Well,
this. High household debts, all of those things is just going to add burden upon the people.
sure. I'll get to the home ownership issue. But what's interesting is the royalties that received from Petronas. Petronas is the national oil company. It was formed in 1974. Almost half of its revenue comes from Malaysia. Almost half of its revenue comes from abroad. A lot of operations in North Africa, in the Middle East, and even in South China Sea. More importantly, Petronas funds almost half of the Malaysian budget. So all money almost pays for what the government of Malaysia execute as his work, as his job as administrator of the country. The recent drop in oil prices would give a lot of concern for those in government. In fact, some opposition politicians have raised that the government should resubmit its budget for 2015, because they would have budgeted at about 100 US dollars, while the oil prices today per barrel is below $60. So that's almost like losing 40% of your of
revenue.
what, yeah. And it's unclear of whether or not Petronas will change its commitment to the government, although they will just have to execute whatever's been told to them by the Prime Minister.
Okay. Well, I want to say this, also relates to subsidizing fuel at the pumps, which is an issue in Malaysia to talk about subsidy rationalization. But have we finished talking about GST? Is there anything we need to add on the surface? Reasonable policy, because a lot of, unreported or tax, not tax evaded, but it's going to burden the people, and maybe we don't actually need that additional revenue. What we need to do is tighten up how we spend the money.
Sure. And I'm not sure necessarily it's a reasonable policy. I'm one of the detractors of GST.
Of course you are.
However, there are arguments for it. The common argument is we don't know how the money is going to be spent. They're just going to collect more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much the issue. But while we're talking about subsidies, we talked about GST, then talked about oil.
Oil. Yeah.
The government of Malaysia has already ended all subsidies as of the 1st of December of this month. So now what they've issued is a monthly mechanism that will decide
Let's set the
what's the
price.
yes, right. Prices of oil will be set monthly, but most important is that Malaysia is finally off oil subsidies. This is a massive, massive change,
Yeah.
and it'll also be interesting if oil prices go up next year. Will the Malaysian government also increase prices substantially? Because right now the end of the subsidy coincides with a marginal increase in oil prices only, very marginal. So it may not reflect as the problems that other Southeast Asian countries have had previously of removal of subsidies because their overnight changes was caused large increases in prices. Malaysia hasn't had that.
Yeah.
That shock may come in the middle of 2015 when oil prices build up.
Yeah. And when the GST is imposed.
Yeah, when it doubles up.
With a boom. I can add that, but I probably won't.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got through the power balance. We talked about GST. We talked about one MDB. Is
You,
it time? Is there
you
anything else
can
you want to throw in?
you well you can also add, and by the time you watch this, or by the time Worlds comes around, Malaysia would have completed its football competition. Malaysia is in the finals of the ASEAN football competition, which is big bragging rights within the Southeast Asian region. Malaysia, against all odds, is in the finals against Thailand. You should definitely use the information from the results of that final to show your extensive knowledge of Malaysian sports.
We're gonna lose, aren't we?
I don't know. The first match is tomorrow, Wednesday.
That's another whole area of debates in Malaysia. Sports. We had a doping scandal recently, still unresolved. We have political involvement in sports
Sure,
throughout from top to bottom, but then we have politics
sure. I will
in
just
everything.
finish. I'll just finish off the economics by
Okay?
talking about privatization. You talked
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
the fourth Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad, initiated at the same time as Thatcher a lot of privatization in Malaysia. In 1981, most of Malaysia was run by civil servants. Thereafter, many parts from telecoms to electricity boards have all been privatized. It's interesting that 30 years later, the realization is all the profit centers have been privatized to those who are very kind to the government of the day, and a lot of the cost extensive sections have been sustained or run by the government. A good example would be water. So the treating of water and the selling of water is privatized, and that's held by friends to the state, and the supplying of water, the pipes, the physical job of getting the treated water from the dams, treatment centers to the pipe, which is low margin, has been left in state institutions, whether or not federal or state. So there's a sense in which a lot of the enterprise in the name of privatization has been left to friendlies. That's a
Right.
discussion. Another key one would be the supply of electricity. Although electricity is provided by Tenaga, which is the electricity company, the providing of the electricity power to Tenaga has been by about 6 independent power producers, whose whose licenses or whose mandate is expiring, which is another interesting discussion. Should they continue to give new IPP contracts to other friends, or should they stop and allow Tenaga to produce their own power? Because a lot of those in Tenaga feel those decisions are better suited to Tenaga executives and not by politicians associated with the government in power.
Sounds reasonable. but a lot, like a lot, that's the problem with a lot of these things, I think, right? They sound reasonable, but there's a reason why. Is there a good reason why the Malaysian government doesn't do things like this, like have open tenders? You could run some kind of counterintuitive argument about too much transparency and how that may
Sure,
slow down policy making, but I don't think we're anywhere near the too much transparency
sure.
stage. Yeah,
Sure. I think as a debater, you're pretty much caught if they put you on that end and
yeah,
defend it. Yeah, that's um, it's a very difficult place to, it's a difficult position to defend. What you can say is that there are civil servants who are interested in providing value to the electorate, and they are trying to do the best they can. The over politicization of every type of government procurement, every type of government expenditure also leads to things being held up because we are suspicious of everything,
yeah.
and therefore everything goes through sometimes too much scrutiny, more than they need to, and that also slows down government for the people. Yeah, that's as far as I can go in arguing
Yeah,
against it.
me too. I mean, like even in you know, few other Asian countries, other countries where initially things were nationalized, they were put in the hands of friends because there's a fear of stability managing these things. I guess eventually more and more of those things need to be parceled out and redistributed to the people and not held in the hands of a few, you know, like what we're going through here in South Korea as well. Um, Anything else on the economic front?
I think quite a mouthful if they understand anything that's been said in the last 15 minutes.
Well, benefit of this is you can watch it again and again and again and
That's
ask
right.
questions, right? They ask questions. We may or may not answer them. Maybe before Worlds and maybe after Worlds. Hopefully before Worlds.